Everybody,
What's up, guys?
welcome to the IronTrap podcast, weekly podcast.
Yes, sir.
If you guys didn't know that, we are doing these on YouTube and also on all the other audio
Yep.
platforms.
Spotify, Apple, wherever you choose to listen.
If you're listening, we do also put it on YouTube, and there is a video format where you'll see our faces. This particular one probably doesn't have a lot to be edited in, but some of the videos where we're reminiscing or talking about old footage, we do drop in some clips.
Yep.
Makes it a little more interesting, but this one is going to be mostly audio, only audio, basically.
Yes, mostly just our ugly faces for however long we ramble. But we have some guests coming up. We're headed on a trip in like 3 days.
Yep.
And we have a couple guests we're going to try and line up, hopefully, meet up with and do some on-the-road podcasts, showing some collections and stories with some friends in another part of the country. So We're excited to get some guests back on. It's been a little bit since we've done a few of them.
Yeah, it would be super fun.
Yep.
So, as far as news and things going on, I think I might have mentioned the last one. We got the 40 Ford race car, old stock car. We are going to be probably offering that up for sale. We haven't had a chance, but I'm going to pull the engine out of it and keep it for ourselves. And then we're probably going to offer it either with no engine or with a stockish type core or something in there. So if you're interested in a very affordable 40 coupe, we will be selling it basically what we paid for it essentially, and I get an engine out of the deal. If you guys learn car guy math, that's what we're doing here.
That's the basis of car guy math right there.
Yeah. So we're going to be doing that. We have that 32 Roadster body still for sale. Eventually, I'm going to probably fall in love with it again, and
pull it back off the market.
It may not be for sale. I don't know yet. We've also talked about taking it a little further, fixing maybe the floors a little bit.
Put it on a chassis.
Make it a roller, make it more palatable for somebody. But time is always the issue. So it's up for sale. If somebody wanted it as is, we're happy to sell it. Obviously, if we start fixing things and putting it on a chassis and doing all that, the price is going to be a little more expensive. So that's your chance for that. I don't think I showed it in a video, but since we're just talking about random news stuff, I bought a T.
Oh, yeah, we haven't talked about that at all.
A 26.7 T. I've been talking about for a while on, people ask about it all the time. I have that old Riley 4-port 32B engine. It's like an old hot rod race engine with a Riley 4-port overhead valve conversion.
I've had that for a very long time.
Very long time. And that's like, I don't want to say it's like the Arden of overheads, but it's one of the better overhead valve conversions for 4-cylinder. The 4-port was, supposedly one of the fastest ones, the best flowing, blah, blah, blah. So it's cool. I've had that. I've never sold it. I've had a lot of people offer to buy it. I have no interest in selling it because I was trying to find a 26.7 Roadster or a 28.9 Roadster and build like an early style 4-banger. People always asking, are you going to do a 4-cylinder? And I kind of figured, since I have so many projects, it's like I want to build a good 4-banger, so that would be the one. So I bought that. It was actually on the Ham or on the Ford barn. I just randomly, again, like we've talked about, just every now and then I browse the classifieds, and a guy had it up for sale. And it was, I thought.
Did he have the engine up for sale? It was the turtle deck you went to buy, and that was
No, not the engine. I'm talking about the body I bought.
Gotcha.
So the body was up for sale in the Ham or Jalopy Journal. I don't remember which one exactly anymore.
Very affordable.
It was pretty affordable. It looks like it's an old restored car that somebody took apart. I think he told me he bought it in the Midwest somewhere. But it's old black paint, still shiny, but it has some spots where like the paint's chipped off or cracked off or whatever. Nothing horrible, and it has some waviness here and there where it was probably a little better than or an amateur restoration, but it's what I was looking for. Shiny but old black paint. When you put it together with the engine, everything will kind of look like it aged together, and it'll be a shiny car, but like old style shiny car, kind of like the Mercury is. So I got to go get that or figure out how to get it up north. It's in South Carolina, about an hour south of Charlotte.
Yep.
So if anybody that listens to or consumes our content is going to be driving or making a trip from that area up towards us or even anywhere close, happy to pay for somebody to move it. If not, when we get time, I may just make a what we call a bomb run, just do a real quick trip, drive down there, pick it up, or fly down and
bring
pick it up, whatever. Luckily, the gentleman that was selling it is in absolutely no hurry to sell it or move it. So he was kind of like, when you get time, whatever. So I'm obviously not going to get to it anytime soon. So I just
It'll hang out at the mill.
yeah, or it'll sit here.
That's true.
We might mock it up. We have a 32 chassis that we got somewhere that we were trying to sell. That's like pinched pretty hard in the front, so it might be a good. I might play around with setting it on some different chassis and see what speaks to me. So that's kind of exciting. Otherwise, yeah. So, but yeah, we got a bunch of trips planned.
Yeah, if you're after any 35.6 parts, we have an estate we're headed out on, like I said, in a couple days. So we'll have a large pile of 35.6 parts.
Yeah, and I think we're stopping a few places.
There's also a 5-window coupe that we have a few people that are interested already that we've talked to at Carlisle and such. But if they pass on it, it'll go up for sale on the market. We're gonna bolt some parts back onto it so it looks like a complete car.
And much like the 33 two-door sedan we had in Oklahoma, we're going to price this stuff very affordably.
Yep.
Like, so for all the people that complain on social media and even comment in our videos about us ripping people off or overpriced Instagram prices, whatever, we sell a lot of times. If you actually follow along, we sell the good shit. We want, if I'm selling a 32 Roadster body that's original body, yes, I'm going to want top dollar because I don't want to give it away because I'd like to keep it. But like, these other cars, we sell them very affordable. The gentleman that bought the 33 two-door sedan got, I think, a killer deal because just some of the parts bolted on that car he could have taken off, sold, or kept, and probably sold the body on a chassis for the same money that he bought it from us for. So, like, same idea with this 35.6. We'll probably sell it very affordably. And, yeah, we'll just see when we get all the parts together what we put on it.
Yep.
So keep an eye out. We're getting a bunch of project cars. That's the whole one of the big ideas for the mill is that eventually we will have a space where you can come and shop, but also like we'll probably have like these kinds of project cars. We'll just have them lined up in the mill so you can come see them. And if you're interested in them, they'll be like set up and they're rollers and you can just pick the one you like. And
I like that one and out the door goes.
Yeah, and the parts will be there. So it'd be kind of neat because it's also cool just to see, like, just having the stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff looks cool sitting around, so it's way cooler than if we just like pack it away hidden in a building, put it in amongst the parts, and it'll just be part of the decor
and the experience.
The experience. There you go. The perfectly shitty experience.
Well, that's a high scale package. You have to pay extra for that.
Yeah. So today we are discussing. We've been doing a bunch of reminiscing. We also get a lot of people that comment that seem to like when we kind of talk about either business or talking about the hobby in general and our the kind of a fireside chat type thing. About what we think of different things in the hobby. So this one, we did one a while ago, if you guys didn't listen to it, where it was kind of, we talked about our young people going to continue with the hobby. And it actually was we got a lot of people that, commented and were talking about it amongst themselves and even people at shows that talked to us. So we thought we'd do a similar one. So this one, we're going to kind of talk about talking about younger people, but also where do we see the hobby, the classic car hobby? We're going to kind of group it as that in 5 to 10 years and even maybe beyond. But we are not going to get political. If you guys don't know, we don't do politics.
Very strongly against discussing that. We will kick you out of the property.
Yeah, leave those comments to yourself.
Yes.
We don't want to get into any of that. We're all friends here and we're talking cars. So basically, we're doing these topics because I'd probably say when we go to shows, that is like or cruise-ins or any car event, swap meets,
or even just people coming to the shop buying parts.
It's the biggest.
Always.
It's probably the biggest question or discussion we get. People will just ask us all the time, especially older people. They'll come to buy parts. They'll be like, "What do you think's going to happen?"
Yeah.
Or are you guys going to be able to sell any of this stuff in 5 years?
And we get those comments a lot on YouTube. We just had, I think it was on the mill video. There was a bunch of people that are like, "This is a Jerry Fuck you still, by the way.
fuck you,
I
Jerry.
think we're far enough in the episode I can say that.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people seem to like my anger on that.
So we
yeah.
have, I think we're going to come up with fuck you or fuck Jerry stickers.
Fuck you, Jerry.
Yeah, just for fun.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of comments that are like, the business isn't going to be viable enough in 5 years to substantiate having that mill property.
And I guess you could. None of us have a crystal ball.
No.
So like when COVID happened, nobody would have. Nobody guessed that. It just happened. So yes, there's always, since the dawn of since we've walked upright, there's always been people that are going to say the sky is falling. So
Always.
there was always those people in that thought process. So yeah, it could happen. Sure, there's some,
I mean, there was probably dudes in the 70s that were doing our business model that got out of it because they thought the hobby was going to die.
Yeah.
70s into the 80s, there was a very big transition more towards street rods, and guys selling original parts were like, I'm getting out. There's no point in selling this stuff anymore. Nobody wants it.
Yeah.
And then, 40 years in the future, and there's still people doing it as a business.
Yeah. So what we kind of want to talk about a little bit is where we see, and this is all opinion based. I mean, we don't know anything, but I'd like to think that we're a little more on the less of pessimists than a lot of the people that we talk to. So we're trying to kind of give our take on it. So we don't do all the big good guy shows and all that kind of stuff like that, to be honest. I'm actually kind of an introvert, so
Me too.
spend a lot of my time just driving my cars and hanging out with friends and doing smaller stuff because that's how I like enjoying the cars. But social media has allowed us to get a glimpse at events all over the country, even if you don't go.
All over the world, even.
Yeah, so I would say that if you look at the big street rod type shows that used to be the place to be, like the York Nazis just happened here, and that our friend Pete went to that. I think he said he's been going for 40 years, 40 years or something, never missed one.
Yeah.
And he said this year might be his last. Now he is aging out, and I think a lot of people in his age group are starting to get to that point where they just don't feel like they can do it or it's not worth it. But the big thing that I'm seeing is those types of shows, while they still are quite big, the crowd is probably a lot of older people. It's like a habitual thing. They go to the Street Rod Nationals and name big city here, and that's what they do.
I feel like the Good Guys show is kind of like that too.
Yeah,
to a point. I think they're doing a better job at attracting some of the younger crowd.
And the cars that are there are they're kind of catering to the young. And even I know, like talking to Pete, he mentioned something about that. There was like they're allowing newer cars into all these street rod shows because they kind of need to, because the hobby is evolving.
Yeah.
And while those cars and trucks and whatever aren't always my cup of tea or something I would want to own, it's the same kind of stuff. I feel like people would have felt the same way when they started allowing 50s or 60s cars at these shows. There was probably the same kind of grumbling.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
An 80s or 90s car is now old, so it's weird for me to feel that way because the cars I was driving in high school are now collectible.
Yeah, you could put antique tags on stuff that I drove to high school.
Yeah, so
which was not that long ago.
Yeah, so it's kind of weird. But I think those types of shows seem to be still bringing good crowds, but I think you're just seeing, I'd probably say 80% of it is probably the same people that have been going for 30, 40 years. They've been going and bringing the same one or two cars they have.
The car has every single sticker from all the shows they've been to in the back window.
So I think a lot of that, you're seeing the older crowd that's done those shows over and over again. I also think you're seeing a shift with younger people that are kind of like ourselves, where maybe we don't enjoy those huge 10,000 people, 3,000 cars type events. I just don't.
And I think it's also the type of show. It's the type of event. Those events, it's a lot more. You just like, it's the location. Those events, you kind of just sit in like a big parking lot.
Yeah.
The shows that I see a lot of younger people going to are more like a destination show. Like you're at a much more picturesque, or like you're at a track, or there's a lot more stuff involved than just like hanging out in a field or a parking lot.
And they're more of some of those events are more of a like party feel, not
Yeah.
necessarily like a rager, but more of like it feels like you're going to somebody's like barbecue or
Yep.
a big like picnic
Yeah.
type
More
deal.
laid back in a
Yes,
sense.
I think when you start looking around, that's where the old people are going to. You're also seeing shows where they're mixing stuff a little more. So it was like that. I think it was last weekend. Saw a little bit of social media stuff. That party at the Pen or
Yep.
whatever, where it's kind of a chopper show, but there's hot rods that are kind of
Yeah.
mixing them together. So it's kind of cool. You're seeing some of that, and I think you're seeing more of that. Those shows is where I see a lot of the younger
Definitely.
people going to that stuff,
It's a
and
genius idea too, because it's like a super cool.
yeah,
Like, just all the photos I've seen, it looked so rad. It's like the best backdrop for photos. They
yep.
have bikes in the prison, which is like cool as shit. You get to walk through the prison.
Yeah, yeah, I think, and they just did one at Penhurst.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it
They
was a
had a
car
show
show.
local at us at
Yeah.
Penhurst, which is cool. And there's like, old amusement parks and
Yep.
old like kind of like ghost town type things or towns that are nostalgic. You're
Hmm.
starting to see people doing shows there, and I think that just makes it more interesting because you're going somewhere that looks different than all the good guy shows. And we're not picking on good guys. A lot of those bigger shows like that, because of the size of the show, they have to do it at like a NASCAR track or some huge fairgrounds. And to be fair, all the NASCAR tracks kind of look the same
Yeah.
that they have them at. So it's cool, but um, that's where I think you're getting more of a division in the crowds as far as street rod stuff goes.
Definitely.
And definitely when you talk about the muscle car, C10 pickup truck, like that stuff, you're seeing a lot of the crowd is kind of going to those types of shows. I mean, that I don't know why, but you are starting to see what I think is cool is like they're doing like they did I don't know if they're calling it the F100 Nationals or something I saw, but there was a show that's like that was all like
Trying to
Ford
think. Yeah.
Ford classic Ford
Yeah.
pickup trucks, and like I think that stuff, the getting diving deep into the niche
Hmm.
is like I'm super into that because that's the kind of stuff that like I would go to. Like they've had like 32 specific shows for a very long time now, Deuce Days and stuff
Yep.
like that. But like I think it's neat when you start doing that kind of stuff where it's like F100, whatever they're calling it, but like it's all people with just F100s or old Ford trucks. So if that's what you're into, like you're going there and that's all you're seeing, you're not walking around and seeing other stuff, or you don't
Hmm.
have to. You don't. I'd rather see less vehicles, but it's a concentration of what you want to see. So I think
Definitely.
that's pretty cool. And social media, I think, has allowed those types of shows to
Oh yeah.
flourish because it's you just get the word out on the internet and you do a show and people see the photos from last year and then it just continues to
That's all
grow.
those grassroots
Yeah.
grassroots events we've seen like in the last 5 years. We're like, that show looks awesome. Then every year it's just like it looks crazier and bigger
Yeah,
and
yeah,
better
yeah.
every time.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. I mean, but it's been going on forever. There was just the in Indy the traditional custom show, like that's only customs. They don't let hot rods in,
Yeah.
so it's like super niche. So like if you only want to see traditional customs, that's the place to go, and you'll see some of the best stuff and historic stuff, and that's really really neat. So I think more of those shows I think I see with the hobby going forward, where people are doing more destination
Or
ones.
niche shows, yeah.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before where I think I love on in Europe and Australia and other countries where they're taking the party type show to another level where they're doing like the old campgrounds and it's
Hmm.
more of like a weekend camping trip bash type thing. Now, of course, the guys are doing the New England vintage drags.
Yep.
They're doing the same kind of idea.
Relics Riots at the
Relics
Gilmore.
rides where you're camping out. Yes, there's a drag race or a car show, but like that's like one day of the weekend, and people come days earlier and they're just hanging out and camping. And I
Yeah.
think that's to me, I like that kind of stuff because it's like I always dread where you go to a show, like Mike said, and you just go and you park for the day and you go back to your hotel and whatever. Like at least like kind of camping there or hanging out there at a cool area.
It helps.
It reminds me of like being a kid where you like went camping and you went to the beach all day and then at night you came home.
Well, it makes everything feel more like a community than
Yes.
just like I'm sitting here with my car, with my lawn chair,
waiting for the judge.
waiting for someone to ask me a question and just like sitting sweating
Yeah.
your ass off in a chair in the middle of a parking lot.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound very fun to me.
Not to me either, but some people do,
And also, back in the day, there was a lot of people that were chasing awards and trophies. That
Yeah.
they were much more proud of winning those trophies
Yep.
at their local car show. I feel like that's not as people don't really care as much anymore.
Kind of, yeah. I think the whole culture has shifted. Where I
Definitely.
think that was the other thing. Like those big shows, what it seems like to me from talking to a lot of older friends is like those were kind of the place to be. So the bunch of guys would get together and they'd cruise, all these caravan, all these street rods or hot rods or whatever, street rods to 10 hours away
Hmm.
because that was the place to be because there was 3,000 cars and that was what was cool to do then. And I think as the culture, and I think there's a lot of people that probably did that maybe that was just what you had to do, but it wasn't their thing. And
Hmm.
all their buddies were doing it. So, and now I think there's a culture shift where with social media and the internet, you can connect with friends that are really into the way you like to enjoy the hobby. So I hang out with a lot of my friends that are the same way that don't do a lot of shows, and we just go and get Mexican food together in a hot rod, or we go to a swap meet early in the morning and do that and have lunch together, and then we come home and continue our day. Like I'm
Yeah,
so busy, I sometimes can just put aside half a day to go do a thing, but being locked at a show for a whole weekend, I can't. So like, I think you're seeing more of that, but the internet has helped with that. As much
definitely.
as some days I hate the internet, I also like it for that because you can connect with like-minded people. So I think there's a lot of people now. There's so many of these grassroots events. You aren't forced to only do the street rod nationals that are
Yeah.
these different ones a year. You can just go, oh, I don't feel like going to that huge show. Just gonna go to the one that's an hour away. That's a cooler vibe,
Yeah.
and do whatever.
And I
So
feel like those shows have always happened, like the smaller grassroots. It was
yeah,
just way
harder to
harder
find
to
it.
find out
Yeah.
about it, or
Yep.
just there was that dude throwing pamphlets in your car, and you just didn't even look at it because you're like, "This is annoying. I got 100
Yeah. Yeah.
pamphlets in my car."
So I think that part of it, as far as shows, we were kind of harping on the events thing, but
Yeah.
I think as events go, I think you're going to see more and more of that. I really like seeing. There's been more of a division also with like small swap meets. Like there's definitely part of our culture of the classic car thing where there's people that just enjoy parts swap meets and parts hunting
Hmm.
more even than probably the car show events, which I'm kind of that way too. Um, so there's been a lot more of these like small swap meet type things where you're seeing people have like, small niche swap meets. And that's one of our ideas that we've been talking about with the mill is like once we get our space all set up there, we have a big parking lot. It's super cool visually once it's all fixed up that like we could once a year do a swap meet or whatever,
Yeah.
once a quarter, whatever we want it to be, and just like basically make it free that people can just come and set up a swap meet space in the parking lot, hang out, do whatever you want, and like that kind of stuff. I love seeing more and more of that. Where it's like I also think a lot of people like the no committal type thing. Like that's
100%.
why I love like cars and coffee cruise in type events. Even though some people don't like those because it is a lot of like sit in your lawn chair thing. I can like cruise in, grab a bite to eat. It's like my excuse to get dinner, and I'm really looking for an excuse to drive the car, and that's just like a stopping point. So I'm gonna
Yep.
get dinner at wherever the cruise in is. A lot of times I don't even hardly look at the cars. I talk to the few guys I want to talk to, and then I get in my car and go home. But it's like an excuse. So I think a lot of these non-committal where you can do a swap meet real quick, very low cost. You don't
Hmm.
need to pre-register or do any special stuff. You just show up with your trunk full of stuff in your hot rod or whatever, sell, and no overhead or very little
Yeah.
overhead, and you can be in and out. And if you're not feeling it, you can just get in your car and go. You're not stuck in not like a Carlisle or a Hershey where you're stuck in your space till 5 p.m. You can't
Hmm.
leave. So
And some of these smaller grassroots shows have a swap meet. So
yeah,
if you don't want to spend all day, walking through the car show, you can walk the swap meet, hit a couple rows of cars, and then just be on your
that's
way.
pretty much if you see me at a car show, I'm usually set up in the swap meet. I'll have the car
Yeah.
that I drove in the swap
I
meet.
think all the small shows that we typically do, that's how we do
Pretty
it.
much how I always do
Yeah.
it. And like for me, I just like that better because like I like being in and around the swap meet people, and then you just park your car kind of adjacent to your space. And
Yeah.
it's like, I don't care about trophy. I don't want any of that. I just want to, it is what it is. So that's why, like, at Hershey, I love that. Like, last year I was probably the most fun I've ever had at Hershey was because I brought the Roadster and I drove it every night. And like that was super fun to me. So that added to the whole weekend because I had my car there. You're digging for parts all day, and then you get in the car and drive it to dinner, and you drive it in the morning. Like,
It also helped that we had like the best week of weather at Hershey ever.
yeah, that'll probably never happen
Yeah.
again.
Next time you take a car, it rains. You're like, this sucks. This is miserable.
Hopefully, with the sedan delivery, at least it'll be a closed car.
Yes.
So if it rains, I won't get totally soaked.
True.
But I think as far as the culture shift goes, you are seeing, I'm seeing at least and I think it's happening in everything, in music and clothing, fashion, styles, trends are happening.
Always, yeah.
Starting and stopping very quickly. And you're noticing it's hard for us as a parts business. We're noticing that it's way harder to kind of like know what's going to be popular. So it's like for a while we talk about all the time, it's like we're selling a ton of X part to do something this certain one way. And then like
wheels is the best example.
Oh yeah.
Because like we'll go on a streak where we can't keep a certain wheel in stock.
Yeah.
Say like for a while there was actually wide fives.
Yeah.
Wide fives, I was selling them like crazy. We couldn't keep it in stock, and now I don't know what happened, but a lot more people are doing like 16-inch wires or 16-inch steel wheels. And like 40 Ford style wheels. So I can't keep those in stock, but I have like this monstrous pile of wide fives. It's like we can't dictate what the trends are going to be, and it's kind of hard to anticipate them because it's just randomly someone builds a car with that style wheel that's insanely popular, and now everyone wants to do it. And it's
seems to be the way that like a guy or a well-known shop will build a car, or a shop starts building cars in a certain style, and then they'll, everyone's likes that style and they start replicating it. But because of the internet, it happens so quickly because that shop's posting update photos of the car. You don't have to wait for the Street Rod show that's 6 months from now to see it. You're seeing it as they're building the car, so you're like, oh man, that looks cool, and then you start looking for it. So we're getting that a lot. We joke even with what we do, like when I decide to pick apart or do a car a certain way, we're like, people might start buying because they saw how we did. Not that we're influential, just they see. Here comes Moon. Hi, buddy. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God. The Moon Show has started. What's up, buddy? What are you looking for? That's my water bottle. No.
Oh, hello. Oh, come say hi to me. I see how it is.
Hi.
Another podcast.
We do one every week.
Oh, wait, has it already been a week since I did your?
Yes.
Yeah.
I bombed your
Last one.
Did I make it into the last
Yeah.
podcast?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I didn't cut any of that out.
Oh God.
Good boy.
I'm not going to cut any of this out either.
Yeah, good boy.
Unless I start cursing, right?
No, we curse all
I
the
already
time.
said fuck like 5 minutes into it.
Damn.
Yeah.
We curse on ours. Yeah, good boy.
Well, hello, podcast world.
That's why we make $0. So we just can't keep it clean.
That's fine.
What do you think, Moondog? And Moon just is in it all the time. It's his
Breathing.
fault.
That's my water. You're not having my water. I'm sorry.
Dad, I'm thirsty.
So, so the trends thing, you're noticing trends change more quickly, especially the niche that we're into is the, traditional kind of nostalgic hot rods and customs. So you're seeing styles of how you customize these like micro styles changing, and maybe it's a color scheme or style or whatever, or it's like you're saying wheels or whatever seems
like
to be
hard chop. What's interesting is the Bonneville style chop was. I haven't seen it. You still see it, but I feel like it's kind of
shifted away.
It's phased out a little bit, and guys are still chopping, but not as hard of a Bonneville or like rolling bone style.
Yeah, I think that is. I don't know if it'll ever go out of fashion, but I think you are seeing. I don't know. Maybe it's just who I follow on the internet. I'm not seeing as many of that. Now, there's a few guys that build cars that way that they're known for, so I think you see their customer base. They're always doing that stuff, but you're seeing. I mean, lately, and I really like it, is the padded top guys like Dave Martinez and our buddy Jerry locally has been starting to pick up with doing them, and you're seeing more of that padded, chopped convertible top being done on like anything convertible, basically. You're starting to see it where I think it's because a lot of the convertibles don't necessarily need to be chopped. If you're buying a car that's already nicely painted, you can just like reprofile the top and it looks cool. And
Yeah, it's a big thing.
End.
They get like frumpy in the back. They are like kind of boxy.
And I also think it's kind of like you can get a nice car and chop it, and you're not doing as much body work. Like if you're decent in metal work, you can chop the windshield frame down, and you could blend some paint in, or just paint the windshield frame. Stop it. This is my water. Not enough. So you're seeing a lot of that, but you're seeing guys are buying like 37, 38 LaSalles.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Insert kind of fancy car here, and then they're just doing the top, lowering it. Skirt, if it doesn't have skirts, putting skirts. Some custom style caps, and those cars are so beautiful as is. You just need to do a little bit of stuff to them. So I think you're seeing a lot more popularity in like anything convertible, chopping it or reprofiling the top, because it's like a lot easier than a hard top.
There was a bunch of cars, bunch of like 35, 36s at the Custom Car Revival, the custom show, that were like that. Had chopped padded tops. There was 2 or 3 of them that I saw that were like slammed, reprofiled tops. I think the one wasn't even chopped.
Oh, really? I didn't notice. Yeah, I mean, obviously it helps to chop them a little bit. That's the style. The 38 that the junkie 38 I have, which I love. That's an endearing term.
He doesn't mean it. It's literally right there.
It's right there. I drove it last night. It was awesome. That car is a good example. Like I'm going to reprofile a little bit. But I think I only chopped it like 1.5 inches or something. He just wants a bottle to wreck. He can have it. I don't care. He's like, no, actually, I wanted the coffee out of it. Take it.
He just wants the coffee out of it.
He can't. Great job. That'll keep him busy for 3 seconds.
He can't get his tongue to the bottom, so it probably will. Or it's going to get stuck on his nose.
He does that sometimes. Yep, there we go. This is a regular occurrence in the house. I get like a Wawa smoothie or something, or you get a slushie or...
Oh, that camera's getting knocked over.
He's pretty good, actually. You'd be surprised. As much of a dumbass he is, he does not knock things over all that often. Can you go? Go lay down somewhere. Go lay down. I don't know where, but not here.
I'm gonna shove my face in that Wawa.
I hope you don't mind the interruptions. If you follow our podcast, some people probably get super annoyed at this, but this is just a snapshot into our life, my life, all the time. So yeah, you're seeing. I've seen a lot of that, and I think people are just figuring. It's like people are figuring out easier ways to make paint and bodywork is so expensive.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's why you're seeing people going that route, because it's like you can get the same killer look, but without paying a hot rod shop to chop and body shop to repaint your whole car or roof.
Yeah.
I've also noticed, and I've embraced it, the whole only painting the area of the car that you worked on. So you're seeing a lot of that where shops are doing, you buy an old restored car or a car that maybe is an old hot rod or street rod and you want to restyle it a little bit.
Yeah.
You pick a car that's a kind of easy to match color, black. Maybe it's a red that's not metallic or, candy or something like that, like blues, whatever. And then you can like chop the roof, customize some stuff, and blend in some paint. Especially with the old school, traditional kind of where patina is acceptable. Mm-hmm. People are like, well, if it's not matched 100% perfectly, nobody really cares. It's not.
And like we've always said, there's a shift of the perfectly shitty or patina look has become more accepted. So that that continues to stay not popular, but stay accepted is a good term for it. So there's less people doing full out street rod builds or fancy high quality paint interior.
I think there's a lot of people doing it. It's become accepted more where you're not like, I think back in those street rod days, you were like shamed, and a lot of guys talk about it, and the shift of the traditional culture, the custom culture scene. That's why that was also shocking back then, because all the like Boyd type everything had to be billet and perfect and shiny, and those guys started coming around. You were kind of like looked down on. Where now the guys that would have had Boyd build them a car are actually building
Perfect.
patina.
Yeah, exactly.
They're building fake patinaed high-end street rods that pose as like a down and dirty hot rod.
Yeah, I don't know what's worse, an actual shitty down and dirty hot rod or a fake high end down and dirty.
I don't know. I like it all. I think it's cool. As I get older, I get more like even keel, where I'm just kind of like, I can see. The only thing I'll say is they're trying to. Those people at least know what they want. They're chasing. They want a car they can drive cross country, and has maybe a Chevy engine that's dressed up nostalgic, but it has a 5-speed or a 6-speed behind it or whatever. But then they do it in a kind of traditional old school manner. So when the car's all closed up, it basically looks, there is that weird. I don't want to say weird. What do you? Come on, go lay down. You're being fucking annoying. Lay down. That's enough. There is that weird. No, I shouldn't say weird. That's enough. There's that like look that's like very modest, subdued street rod, where it's like really nice paint, solid color usually, but they usually have some kind of either, I don't want to say fake, but yeah, fake magnesium wheels, or that kind of like torque, not even torque thrust, just like a mag wheel, but it looks more subdued. It's not like a billet wheel.
Yeah.
And like those cars look cool. They definitely look awesome. And that's just like a version of it. And that's that little niche where I think a lot of those guys that were building the Boyd style cars that were real high end, they now are doing those type of cars. And I mean, personally, I'd rather see them because they're just much more classic looking.
Less pastel colors with crazy graphics and tweed.
So that, I think the trends have changed to the people that are building those cars. They want a high-end car that's beautiful, super nice. Everything's awesome, works great. Everything that my car is not. My car leaks, is not reliable, and is crappy, and it is what it is.
Yes.
But, so as long as you know what you want, but that's a little niche of it. And you're seeing these Gathering at the Rock, Triple Crown type shows where it's like, that's the real high-end stuff. And you look at the photos and you're like, all the cars are beautiful. They're all pretty, like, nostalgic. That's why I started using that term nostalgic more than traditional anymore. Because they're all nostalgic. They all fit the vibe. They're just, underneath they might have some modern stuff. And that's totally cool. But at least the cars are just like, you're not doing these wacky graphics and stuff that didn't age well. So I think all those cars will age very well. And no matter what the trends are, those cars will always be beautiful because you change the wheels to whatever's cool with it. Like you could put those cars, for instance, you could put like some 40 Ford style wheels with some hubcaps, and that would make the car even more subdued.
Yep.
And I might even like the car even more because it's like even more nostalgic. So it's like easy to change those cars around, whereas these cars that were like Frenched in everything and
Mustang 2 front ends.
Yeah, all that stuff's kind of a little harder to change, but eventually people are going to start redoing those types of cars because that's what's going to be around for affordable. Because as the crowd ages out that was into those, you're seeing more and more of those cars pop up for sale, and they're going to be harder and harder to sell over the years because the people
100%.
that appreciate that style. And I think there's going to be a trend in 5 to 10 years where those are going to be the cheap cars to buy.
Oh, 100%.
Like right now,
we're seeing it a little bit now.
Well, I think you're seeing it right now for sure with the restored cars. We proved it with doing the ruined roadster. That was kind of an experiment that worked. But a lot of guys before us were doing it, and there's shops that do it all the time. Like you're taking an older amateur restored car that presents well, and you're building a kind of decent quality hot rod without doing a lot of work. You're skipping over having to do paint work because you're just embracing what the car has. And like that car was a good example. If you were up on that car, it's not by any means perfect, but in photos, people would come up to me like, that car is beautiful. I can't believe you said. I'm like, actually, if I want to be picky, that car had a lot of little things and it presents well, but that's the cars that you can buy right now. But I think there's going to be eventually a shift where you're going to be able to buy, some of these, any pick the year 32 to 30 to 40
Yeah.
street rods that are already, a lot of them are already chopped. Now, the only thing that's a little worrisome with those cars is a lot of the work that was done in let's say the 70s and 80s and 90s. The metal work is probably pretty poor underneath.
I'm not saying the pre-war stuff was any
No,
better.
no, I'm just saying if we're talking about those cars being affordable,
Oh yeah.
you have to be careful because I think you might. There's been a couple times where I've almost pulled the trigger on buying some like street rods that I thought I could turn around, where maybe the car was a good color, and you take the fiberglass fenders and some of the weird sunken in license plate rear, lower deck on a 34, whatever, gas tank cover. And then I started looking at it more, and I'm like, man, I bet if I take those fenders off, you can just see how the bodywork is done. It's probably ugly underneath in there. And it's like, I don't know if I want to get into that because that might ruin the whole deal. So you have to be a little more careful with that. But again, if they get really cheap, you're just buying it for the body and it's already been chopped, and maybe you can kind of massage what they did and you're ahead of the game. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to buy those types of cars for a fraction of what they would cost to build.
To build one of those now would be multicolor pastel paint job. Like it's expensive enough to paint a car one color.
Yeah.
Then to do like crazy graphics with
and-
taping it off and spraying it multiple times. I don't even want to think about what one of those would cost to paint.
Yeah, and I just mean even just to build a chassis. The only good thing is a lot of those street rods from that era, the chassis are boxed. A lot of times they're modified and beefed up because putting a big block or a built small block in the car was kind of popular. So everybody was beefing the frames up, putting bigger rears in the back and big meats in the back.
And some of those back then, it was also more popular to keep the front. All the front cross members were usually there on those cars.
A lot of times, yeah.
And they just added the stuff for Mustang too. They weren't front halving those frames yet.
True.
So when you take everything off and cut all the brackets and bullshit off for Mustang too, the front cross member and frame is all still there. So you can convert it back to a straight axle with some work. But some of the modern street rods now, they cut the whole front of the frame off.
It's kind of the proper way to do it.
It is 100%.
But that's what we've been looking at when we've been considering buying cars like that, to maybe make them more nostalgic or bring them to the current trends or whatever. From a business standpoint, it's like, okay, well, car still has original front cross member, still has the rear cross member. They just added ladder bars and all kinds of stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, we could. And that's not to say, let's not mix it up. Mustang 2, Corvair steering box, all that stuff, it drives nicer.
Yeah, it does.
The stuff that we're reverting back to, we're going back to where it handles and drives much more. Well, it drives like a 32 Ford instead of driving like a Mustang, would drive. A 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s car would drive. So, you can convert some of those cars back. So I think there's going to be a point where the price is so affordable, you can be like, all right, well, the frame is boxed. Maybe if you're not building a totally traditional period perfect car, like it already has a 9-inch in it. Okay, that's fine. I wanted to take the small block out and put a caddy in it or put a blown olds in it. Okay, well, that can still hold the power. Everything they did, or you take the small block or big block and you just take the billet stuff off and put some Cal Custom valve covers.
Backdate the engine.
Yeah, and then it's like, that's how I've been looking at a lot of those cars, where I used to just turn my nose whenever they were for sale. Now I'm like, I kind of look them over and you crawl underneath. You're like, this with a little bit of work can change some stuff around. Because some of those cars, a lot of it's just kind of froofy stuff that's put on. You pull
doodads and the
wiring harness that's got all the extra crap in it. And maybe you rip all that out and just make it basic and take all the blinky gauges out and all that stuff. And maybe you got to change the dashboard because you want to put just some like more nostalgic gauges in or something like that. But like that's a lot easier than like that car's already chopped and the paint's decent. So I'd rather just respray a dash than like the whole damn car. So I think that is going to be one of the shifts I think that you're going to start seeing. I don't know if those cars are going to, I would imagine at some point they probably will, those cars will start becoming collectible again, where people will be hunting down the
Now,
cover car of
I
1983.
will say that is happening. I have a bunch of friends that are into mini trucks.
Okay.
That resurgence of like the 80s to 90s style with like tweed interior and crazy graphics and those like goofy billet wheels are becoming very popular and guys are chasing those trucks down.
But I could see that on mini trucks because that was the heyday of those.
Yeah.
Like hot rodding had so many eras.
Yeah.
Where mini trucks that was the dry lakes.
That was the pinnacle. Yeah.
That was the dry lakes era for street trucks.
Yeah.
You know, the mini trucks was that 90s era. So like of course people were going back to that original era. You know, it's music, you go back to rap in the era that it was popular, and that's what you're seeing, a shift back to that. Old school country music, you see people shifting back to, you know, that. So I think that's where you find that original golden era. You're always going to see that shift. So I don't know with the street rods. I'm sure there'll probably be people start hunting down some of those cars. We're seeing it with 70s era T-buckets and 70s builds on hot rods and street rods. But I don't know if the 80s and 90s and early 2000s hot rods will ever come back. I don't know. But I feel like we flipped the script where guys were taking real old hot rods from the 50s and pulling the flatheads and pulling the caddies and the olds out of them and making them into 80s style billet street rods.
Yep.
Now we're going the other way. That's what I see in 5 to 10 years is people taking 80s and 90s. And we joke about it a lot, like with the ruined Roadster, where it's like, I'm just undoing what someone ruined. So somebody took a nostalgic 50s built hot rod and then they just changed it all. And it might have been chopped back in the day by, you know, insert famous builder here.
Yeah.
And then it had all these versions. You can't even tell what it was. So like, I think it's the same thing that's been happening forever. But now that the trends have changed, I think some of those cars are going to
get backdated. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to start getting backdated. And you may even be able to buy the car cheap enough that you can strip all the paint off completely and start from zero.
Yeah.
Because it's that much cheaper. Because a lot of those guys were starting with cars that were not real rusty. You know,
100%.
In the 70s, the 80s even, you could still find cars that weren't super rotten. Where nowadays it's a lot harder to find that solid car. So you could start with a car that needs minimal rust repair, and you could, even if the paint job's terrible, you could strip it down to bare metal and you're already ahead of the game because you're not doing terrible rust repair. You're just stripping off full of paint, or you get it dunked in one of those acid tanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Stripper tanks.
Yeah.
So I think I see that. I think I see a shift. I've noticed there's a shift in the people that are only into the culture. That's one thing I've noticed with younger people. Talk about millennials and different stuff like that. I've noticed that there is a shift in, there's a lot of people that they want to be involved in the culture. They have hardly any interest in owning a car. I have some guys I know that are like that, or I see around at events, and you're like, man, that guy's a guy or gal or people. They're at every event. They're super nerdy about the history and the culture and stuff like that and the music, but they wouldn't know how to change a flat tire. They don't have any interest in it. It's not, I used to, when I was younger, like talk shit on those type of people, but now I'm like, they're just enjoying the hobby how they enjoy it. So maybe they have a small apartment and or financially they can't have a hot rod, but they still want to go to the show and watch the rockabilly bands play, and they want to hang out and do that kind of stuff. They shop for the vintage magazines, they shop for the keychains and the any of the clothing or whatever, or they collect old artwork from, you know, Roth artwork or something like that. It's like that's all part of this culture. I'm sure, you know, back in the 50s there was guys that didn't really have a cool car, but they were hanging out with all their friends that did, and they were still involved. They just
at the dry lakes and all that stuff.
Yeah, but they just chose not to have a car. They like being around.
And that's actually probably pretty smart.
in retrospect, it is. Some days I think about maybe I should just sell all my junk and just have like a collection of speed equipment.
Yeah.
It'd be way more fun.
Yes,
I was actually joking with our friend George that's been doing Columbia Rears for us. George is he's in his, I think his 70s or late. Sorry, George, if you listen to this, I don't know your age.
We'll have to ask him. He'll be here in
He'll be a little bit, but George has been going to street rod shows forever, and he's been in the, he went through that whole phase of the street rod nationals and all these big events where they would cruise and whatever. And he was telling me, I was at a little car gathering last evening, and he was telling me a story how I didn't realize his cabriolet doesn't have a flathead in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's got a small block in it.
Oh.
It used to have flatheads in it, and he told me this whole saga of stories. I'm like, wait, you're like one of the guys in our area that works on like all our local car community. He's one of those guys that's always fixing everybody's rebuilding flatheads. He sells flatheads that he rebuilds and fixes stuff that that other people won't touch. And I'm like, wait, you're like one of the flathead guys.
The guy.
He's like, I have the fever, but none of my cars have it. I'm like, what?
He's actually probably pretty smart for that.
And that's what I thought. I was like, you know what? He's kind of smart. And he told me some saga about he had some, his flatheads in that car, and he kept blowing head gaskets for like a matter of 3 years. He changed the head gaskets and messed with his flathead in his car for years. And then finally he was like, you know what? I want to drive this thing on long trips.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the small block in. And that's fine. But I just thought that was funny.
That is
like,
funny.
He likes flatheads. He loves the the nostalgia on them, but like he doesn't have it. Both of his cars don't have
That's
them in
so
it. And I'm like, you're really smart.
Exactly.
That's kind of smart.
Well,
Some days. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people that we're seeing more and more of that are just into that are more hardcore into the culture. I'm sure it was like that for a long time, but yeah, we're seeing a lot of that where the people are getting into collecting certain type of stuff. So old magazines, vintage clothing that's of that style, signs, and all those people are peripheral to the classic car hobby, and they may eventually get a classic car or
they're also, they could be the other end where you see older guys phasing out of the hobby. Say they don't have the space or the ability to work on work on an old car anymore. It's cool to see them still participating.
Yeah.
But they don't have an old car anymore. They buy the cool magazines or the ephemera stuff to keep involved.
Yeah. I'm probably more speaking on the younger generation where you're seeing people that it is to build a lot of this stuff is a little expensive or can be. So it's cheaper to get into the culture and the stuff around it, and you go to an event like I said and go see bands play. You wear vintage clothing, you do all that stuff. So that's all totally in the same realm. But probably the last kind of thing is we get a lot of questions about people buying, like Mike mentioned in the beginning, is anyone going to be buying this stuff or parts or whatever? I think the one thing that I've even noticed as long as I've been in it, and already, is a shift in stuff that was not sellable or was quote unquote junk is now totally worth something. Again, it's not as good, as valuable as a new old stock part, but like, I think that's one big shift that I've noticed, and I think is going to continue to happen as the good stuff gets more expensive. If you want to get into this stuff affordably, you're going to have to start with like rusted, broken in half Model A or T or whatever, or you're going to have to build a 32.3 window from scraps because that's the only way you can afford to get into one. And I think people have been doing it forever. I just think the percentage of people doing that now is much larger.
Yeah.
You're seeing, especially with social media, I feel like you're seeing way more guys that are building like a 3-window from scraps.
Yes.
And that's how I think has shifted some of our mindset for the parts business. Is we've said it before, we say that everything sells. So it's like, we've gotten 3-window doors that are like junk, and you go, you know what, the top window surround is kind of usable, let's just cut it off or leave it together. And then sure enough, we sell it.
Even 4-door stuff.
Yeah.
4-door, 2-door sedan. You see a lot of that stuff, like the B-pillars. Someone's going to take that B-pillar and chop it up to use it for who knows what, but it's there and it exists, and they might have a 3-window that has nothing, and they'll make it work for whatever they need.
Yeah. So you're seeing a lot more of that. We're seeing a lot more of, I think it's even more than it used to be where original parts, we're seeing a shift that, and it's good for us, that a lot of the reproduction part places were making their parts in China and overseas, and not getting political, just saying because of some of the things that have changed over the last handful of years, cost of items from China have gone up, just like everything. So now what you're finding is Bob Drake or Carpenter or whoever, they go back to their factory in China because they're out of running boards that they were reproducing and they want to stamp new running boards. Well, now the cost is like quadrupled because they had them stamped
20 years ago.
exactly. So now you're finding that now the cost for them is too high, so they just discontinue it. 34 grills. Drake doesn't make them anymore. The price has gotten crazy on those because they were pretty good quality and they don't exist anymore.
Yep.
And you're seeing a lot of that. So we've joked a bit, like we're seeing, it's probably kind of like it was, let's say, in the 70s, where there wasn't a lot of, there was reproduction stuff as far as gaskets and, new old stock stuff, but like there for a while, it was like you could get everything for a 40 Ford reproduction.
100%.
Or most of these early Ford cars. And now a lot of that stuff's tapering off. I ran into it with the 39 Mercury. No, they have not reproduced. They did for a while, but windshield gaskets for a 3940 Merc, the place, whoever was making them, they haven't done another run in a very long time. And a lot of people are waiting and waiting. And the manufacturers are kind of like, maybe next month, maybe next month. So you're having to look for other alternatives, either a new old stock part or, like Mike said, I bought another brand gasket from another make, like a Mopar or something, that somebody said on one of the groups actually fits and works okay. You just, the car's chopped anyways. You have to modify it. But so now what we're seeing is people are going full circle and you can't get some reproduction stuff. So now we're selling, people are back to like, you know what, I'll rebuild my wheel cylinders.
Yep.
I'll rebuild this. Or the quality is poor.
Subpar, yeah.
Some of the Speedway stuff is hit or miss. So sometimes people are just annoyed with getting very poor quality and they'd rather recondition original parts. So we're actually changing a lot of that stuff where we used to be like, just throw wheel cylinders in the trash. Nobody's redoing them. And
Yeah.
it's like, you know what? You could still get a rebuild kit for $8.
Like stupid cheap at a NAPA.
Yeah, and it's like, but getting brand new wheel cylinders have started to get so expensive because the reproduction cost has probably gone up so much, and now it's like $50 to $70 for a freaking wheel cylinder. It's like, you know what? I think I'll spend some time and
Hone
hone a set out and rebuild them. Same with master cylinders.
Yep.
It's like, so all that kind of stuff. I think we're going to see a shift where actually people are going back to doing that, which is a chain effect for our business. Now people are looking for all those tools that used to be obsolete.
Oh, we get
K.R. Wilson tools and specialty tools.
like kingpin reamers.
Yep.
We get a message probably 2 to 3 times a week. People looking for kingpin reamers.
Yep.
And what was the other one someone was looking for the other day? I can't remember. Like all their specialty tools, we get messages constantly.
Yep.
If we could stock them, I would sell a half dozen a week, I bet.
And we've considered some of that stuff. You could still get a reamer that is that size. I mean, Max used to sell it. It's quite expensive for an American-made one. But in the same breath, if you're okay with the internet, you can just go to MSC and probably
Find that same
reamer. So we haven't gone down that rabbit hole of stocking every little thing, but we do try, and when we get in original stuff or vintage stuff, we do sell it. But like that's where all the K.R. Wilson tools and some of this old like stuff for machining engines and different stuff like that, you're seeing where a lot of the good machine shops are closing.
Yep.
And it's getting harder to find somebody that wants to work on old engines. So, or there's an extremely long wait. So you're now starting to see, much like the niche car show thing, you're seeing niche of guys doing work that for classic cars. So there's like, there's guys that are making their own jigs and they're dropping axles and doing that stuff. And the guy might only have like a 2-car garage, but he's really good at that. And now he has a little business model and he's selling them because of the internet. You can just start selling axles, or a guy could start doing flathead machine work and he gets an old Sun and Hone and he gets, you get an on block boring machine and all that kind of stuff. And now you could start doing those specific engines. You get all the K.R. Wilson tools to take them apart and
Yep.
work on them.
Yeah, if you focus on one engine, you need a lot of tools. But if you think about a machine shop, they're doing
Everything.
any
Yeah.
engine, so they have to have all these crazy tools. But if you focus on just flathead stuff, you could do it out of a fairly small shop.
Yeah, so you're starting to see a little bit of that, I think, at least in my experience, and seeing it on the internet where you're seeing guys,
Definitely.
or hardcore guys, kind of like we're doing, where like, you're like, I can't find anybody to do this thing anymore. I guess I'm going to buy an old machine and teach myself how to do it, and
Yep.
I'm going to do it for myself and my friends or the local community. So you're seeing guys that are buying some of this old machinery and putting it back into use. So now when we're going out picking, we're kind of looking at stuff differently. It's like a drum lathe. For a while, I would just be like, why would you even want anybody? Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
But now some of these brake drums are so hard to get, or you can't get them. It's like now people are back to, well, I guess I'll cut a drum for my old car because there's no option
Exactly.
for it. So I think you're going to continue to see that as the big businesses can't justify reproducing some of the stuff. We're going to go back to original parts and reconditioning them for these cars if you're doing nostalgia builds.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you can put disc brakes all around and you can get those parts any day of the week, but I definitely am noticing for that the stuff's getting more expensive. It's getting harder to find, and if you plan to build more than one car, the tool is a lot of times these vintage tools are so affordable. It pays for itself after one or two uses.
Definitely.
Or, if you're in a car club or you have some local buddies that are into it, you buy and do that service for a few of your friends, and they give you, a small fee or buy you dinner or whatever. It pays for itself pretty quickly. So I think we're going to see a shift in that kind of stuff where the tools, even more so, aren't just being bought for nostalgia. They're being bought again to be
Actually used.
put back into use. And metal fab guys have been doing it forever. I mean, those guys, metal shapers and metal fab guys, they've been buying old equipment and restoring it and using it because it's honestly better, and that's why they've been doing it. But now you're starting to see it with more smaller stuff. I bought key machines because it was just hard to find anybody to cut a key or duplicate a key for an old car, and I was tired of mailing the stuff away. I just got the tools, and I think we bought that one key machine with a ton of keys in Swami, Ohio for like
$50.
$50, and there was enough keys on there. It was worth $50.
Yeah, it was worth buying it just for all the blanks that came with it.
Yeah, and
'Cause we hit our shop down. Slight side tangent. The shop downstairs has this old ass doorknob, and we can't find blanks for it.
You can't get them new anymore. You have
Yeah.
to find vintage ones.
And I remember that one had one blank on it.
There's two.
One or two, and I was like, it's just worth it just so we can have more spare keys for the shop now.
Yep. So, and then we were actually just in Maryland.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
He had a big key. Actually, some people in the video commented, you ought to buy that key machine. And we may buy that to just pass it on to somebody else. I have one that works pretty well. Or maybe his is better, and maybe I will buy his and sell the one I have. But he had a whole stack of those keys. There was like 50 of them.
Yeah.
I bought like maybe five or
Yeah.
six just so I can cut some extras to have. But like, that's the kind of stuff. If you get into this nostalgia stuff, now you're on the hunt. And it kind of makes it more fun. That goes back to the like niche thing. It's like if you start getting into all the peripheral stuff of I got a vintage shop and I want to put all vintage locks or doors on it. Now you got something new to hunt for.
Yep.
And that's where you go on these side tangents that makes the hobby really, really fun. And I enjoy that. I mean, with having the mill now, it's like super cool for me because I'm on Marketplace every day looking for neat old stuff.
If you go through your search history, there probably isn't anything like flathead or early Ford related for months now. It's just been like...
It's hardly anything old car right now on my Marketplace. It's all like...
barnwood.
Yeah, it's like it's industrial salvage and old display cabinets and all kinds of stuff. So I think we're seeing that shift in all that stuff. Now, the other thing I'm seeing a shift in is there's been this whole hustle culture thing that has come up, and we're guilty of that. I mean, our business is run off of that kind of mentality, but that whole hustle culture thing has made it way harder to find a deal for the average guy that's just looking for a deal to buy something because you're building an old car. Way harder. When you go to the swap meet, I feel like way more guys running around trying to buy stuff and resell it. So it's harder to find a good deal on this stuff. And I guess we're guilty of it too because we're buying estates out that the stuff doesn't even make it to the swap meet.
Yeah.
But that's that's shifted, I think, a little bit where it's harder to find crazy good deals on stuff because there's so many people. If it goes on Facebook Marketplace and it's a good deal, it's gone within minutes or a day because there's a reseller that's buying it
Yep.
and flipping it. And every facet of anything that's sellable, new and old, there's somebody that's trying to buy it cheaper and sell it and make a buck. So I think you're going to see a shift where that's just what it is. You're just going to, it's going to be very hard to just find a person at a yard sale that has a 32 Roadster
100%.
body sitting or an old car part, and it's super, super cheap.
It's almost like winning the lottery.
Yeah, and everybody, the other part of it is that almost everyone is educated. Everyone is even further educated as the years go on because cell phones and with AI and stuff like that, where you can photo search an item, even the people that used to be, for a while there was like old people didn't use cell phones, so you still could get deals because they couldn't search the internet. Well, newsflash, most old people know how to use a phone and they're
Pretty
totally
tech savvy.
They're pretty tech savvy. And every year that goes on, the old people that you're trying to get deals from are more tech savvy. So it's going to be harder to pull one over or get a killer deal because a lot of times they're much more educated. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that crazy, insane deal on something is going to happen less and less because of that. So you need to either be willing to pay that price, or like a lot of people are doing, we're all wheeling and dealing to pay for what we want, or back to the you got an old machine and you're doing work to trade people for the parts you want, or you now can afford it because you're making money with your hobby. So I think there's a lot more people nowadays that are making money doing something that's peripheral of the hobby to help pay for the hobby. I think that's going to be even more and more
100%,
popular, making a little clothing company, or you're a sign painter and you're selling your artwork and whatever it is. I'm going to say a good percentage of those people are doing it to help afford the hobby. It's
their
just
addiction.
You buy a bunch of, when you're reselling, it's like you buy a bunch of junk to help afford to pay retail for the thing that you really want. And that goes back to the car guy math thing.
Yep.
So
Now, do you think there's been a shift in our age of customers?
I still think predominantly our customer base is older, but I would say older as in my age, 40s.
Yeah. So an interesting thing, with social media, you could see the age range of people that consume your content. You would think the majority of the people that consume our content are older, are in 50 and up. And actually, if you look at our graph, the bulk of the people that view our content are from 30 to 45.
Interesting.
Age grade. I looked at it the other day. We compared to most.
We skew older compared to most people.
Yeah, 100%. Most it's
channels. Yeah.
very like teenager, early 20s. The bulk of our viewership is 30s to 40s age, and I believe a lot of our customers, I feel, are that age as well. But the people that we meet in person are always at swap meets, which happen during the week. And I feel like a lot of those people are older people that are retired or, self-employed or something of that sort. But even at Carlisle and Hershey, we have a lot of young people, 20s. I'm only in my 30s, so my age range, that come up to us and do buy parts from us.
Yeah, I think people are, now that there's YouTube, everybody's making a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I think it's giving more opportunities for people to get inspired by whatever that person's content. If you enjoy their personality or their type of car or whatever their niche is, you can then watch it, consume it on your own time, and get really into it, and then get inspired to do whatever. So I think that's how the younger crowd is getting into it. And back to what we talked about all the way in the beginning with the events, a lot of those younger people that we sell to or we meet, there's a ton of them that they don't even go to any shows. They build a car and they enjoy it with their kids and they want to drive it and go get ice cream, and maybe they take it to Trog once a year, and that's all they do with their car. They're not out every weekend at a show. They're not going to the big gathering at the Rock to be seen because they want to have where the it people and the cool
Yeah.
cars, top quality cars are. They're just driving it to their local cruise in. They're going to get ice cream. They just want something to bop around in. So we're getting a lot of those type of peoples where they're just buying the car, they hang
Yep.
out with their friends, they don't go to that many shows, but we see them at events, but they just may not bring their cars.
It is funny how, like, when we're at these events, people are always like, there's no young people here. And it's like, it's Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Majority of younger people have like normal 9 to 5 jobs,
Yeah.
and they're just at work. They're not here. A lot of the people that come pick up physical parts from us, say, later in the afternoon or weekend pickups, 90% of them are our age group
Yeah.
people. They're younger, they have jobs, they have families, they have other things to do, but you go to a swap meet at 9 a.m. during the week. So it's hard for people to judge age
Yeah.
group of a hobby based on like events that happen during the week, or those old guys don't go to the small grassroots shows that are on the weekend.
Yeah, not as much. Again, it's a culture
Yeah.
thing. The type of people where they hang out is different,
Yeah.
and there's an intermingling of that. But if you're the person that's saying no old people, no young people are into it, you're probably not the person that's going to the places where those people
Or
are.
viewing or have social media to see
Yeah.
what's happening. Like all the Facebook groups,
Yep.
there's a large predominancy in those groups that are, younger people building their first hot rod, getting into it,
Yep.
for the first time as a younger adult.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there is. Now I'll say, I'm sure the percentage of to the mass public is
Yeah.
smaller than it was in the 80s, or whatever. But I still think there's a pretty good amount of people that are getting into it. I think they just, it's a little harder to figure out what we've talked about in other podcasts, like when to go to a Carlisle. We get that question from younger people all the time that are like, I want to go to Hershey for the first time. What day do I go? Or what? Everybody just kind of assumes because maybe not everybody grew up going to Carlisle and
Yeah.
Hershey with your pappy or, your father. Maybe you're the first generation of doing this and your dad was an IT guy and didn't even like cars. And
Yep.
now you want to get into old hot rods or muscle car or whatever. And you don't know when to go to those. What day is good to go to that? So you go on Saturday afternoon to Carlisle. You're like, well, this sucks. These guys, IronTrap and all these other channels are showing all this great stuff, and
There's nothing here.
Nobody's here. It's like, well, nobody. You didn't realize that you need to come on Wednesday, and you kind of need to take off work if you want to get you want to really see a thing, or you got to go Friday morning before all the vendors pack up. So like, I think there's a lot of that's harder to learn. Luckily, with social media, more and more people are kind of educating everyone on that.
And I think we're also, us as, our small niche of the car culture as a whole, we're kind of on the smaller end of what's happening in car
Oh, yeah.
culture.
Yep.
Like if you look at it as a whole, I think I wouldn't say there's more people into cars than there's ever been, but there's a lot of stuff going on for cars than there's ever been. There's so many different styles of racing going on now, different types of car shows. You may not be into import stuff, but the import scene's probably as big as it's ever been, I want to say.
I would say so.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
it's like there may not be as many people into old cars, but there's more people into old cars than probably in a very, very long time.
and part of that I think is also
Social media.
social media because you're seeing channels that are building down and dirty cars just to have fun.
Race cars, drift cars,
Yeah, all
any
that.
drag cars, any
Well,
of
you-
that stuff.
You have these big channels, and I think Freiburger's a good reason for a lot
Oh,
of this.
100%.
And Finnegan,
Yeah.
them being put on a global platform, getting pieces of shit out of the junkyard and getting them running and driving them and having fun and embracing that.
And having fun with your friends, like the
Yeah.
two of those
Yeah,
knuckleheads driving 500 miles in some piece of junk they pulled out of the junkyard looks like way more fun than like any of the other stuff that they showed on cable hot
Yeah.
rodding TV
Yep.
when we were kids.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that now people are showing that it's okay to have a junky car and build it on a budget and
Yep.
have fun. So that stigma of your car has to be nice and shiny and you get looked down on if you don't have a show car. So I think it's made it so that more people can join the
Yeah.
hobby. And again, it's just maybe that some of those cars aren't the interest of our small little niche, like Mike said. But I think there's a ton of that stuff, and I enjoy. I think just like hot rod and customs, there's the same thing with all the different facets of the car community. So obviously, I'm used to be in the German car stuff real heavy when I was younger. Now I'm seeing a resurgence of the style of cars that I liked and built when I was younger, in my 20s
Yeah.
and teens and 20s, and maybe even a little later. Those cars are now, because trends move so quick, they're now retro and cool, and people are doing that. And you're like we were saying about the subdued cars.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing these German cars that are done in a 90s rapper kind of style, where it's just lowered with a cool set of wheels and just like classy bunch of chrome, and like that whole stance thing is, there's a division of that. So you're
Yep.
getting the European and Japanese car guys that are more going the subtle way, which I used to always be when I did those cars, where it's just like the car sits right, it looks cool, but they're not trying to be shock value. It's much like the difference between a rat rod and a traditional hot rod. It's like you're seeing this division. So all these niches are now subdividing
Yep.
into what people like. And I think that's what's allowing more people to get involved in it, because you can, if this is the little sub niche I like, because I found a group of guys on TikTok that are posting their little get-togethers of those type of cars. Well, man, now I know where to go. So like I've been seeing in, if it's New York or somewhere, there was like a gathering of like Mercedes and BMWs from the like 70s to 90s, and they're all real classy kind of cars, and those guys are all getting together. It's been popular on my TikTok, and I'm like, man, those like kick-ass
Yeah.
cars being done. So like even though I don't have one of those cars currently, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that sub niche.
I mean, that's the joy of social media. I feel like we talked about the good guy stuff. Back in the day, if you weren't into that stuff, but all your buddies were, you kind of just followed along and went
you
with
had
it.
to do,
Yeah,
yeah.
now you can connect with some dude that's on the complete other side of the world, and you could build a car community, but online, and you can share what you're doing and get inspiration from other people instead of just being like, well, Bill down the street's the only other car guy in town, and he's into whatever. So I guess
That's
I'm
what I'm
gonna,
gonna build,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna kind of just follow suit. Or there's one car club and they're really into Mustangs, so I guess I'm into Mustangs now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
now you can connect with anyone you could possibly want in the world that's into the same whatever wacky shit you're into.
Yeah, you can build whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's where you're seeing. That's where I see things going. That sub niche is only gonna fragment off more, where guys are just gonna get into a specific style of whatever make, model, whatever it is. You're gonna get into that, and then that's what's gonna continue to fragment. But the great thing for businesses like ourselves, we pick something that's universal, so it doesn't really matter what style within reason that you're doing. Most of our parts transcend all of the
Yep.
eras. So even if you want to build a 70s style street freak, you're still going to need the same type of body panels. You may not be buying a flathead from us, or old Dry Lakes type speed equipment, but you're going to probably still need the same hood as the guy that's building.
Still gonna need a straight axle. You're gonna
Yeah.
put disc brakes on it, but you're still gonna need a straight
Potentially,
axle.
yeah.
So like a lot of even some of the smaller mechanical stuff still interchanges
Yeah.
between any style.
Right, yeah. Windshield frame. Everybody needs a windshield frame, and if they don't reproduce it,
Yep.
you're going to need a windshield frame, because you can't reproduce that or make it by hand easily. So,
Yep.
like, I think with us, that's why when people do all this doom and gloom, we're usually not too bothered, because it's like, I always just say, unless they completely ban,
This is our
Yeah.
small political
yeah,
segment.
unless they ban, and I'm not even being political,
Yeah.
like, I'm just saying this kind of wild state. It's like, I don't think in our lifetime we'll ever see
No.
them banning gas-powered cars, fossil fuel cars. If they completely outlaw them to the point where all these cars can only be static pieces,
Displays.
like, I remember a little while ago, might have been one of the elections, we had some guy wild walked into our booth somewhere. I think Kate was actually there at the show, because she always quotes the guy. But he walked in and he was ranting and raving that they were gonna make. He heard some whatever whisper down the alley that they were gonna make you fill all gas powered engines, fossil fuel engines, with cement, and everyone in the planet. So no one can drive a fossil fuel vehicle. They were going to make you pour cement in every single one. Like, really? Like, I get there may be things changing in the world, with climate change, whatever. But like in our lifetime, and this guy was in his probably 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
In your lifetime, you don't got to worry about that.
Exactly.
That's not going to be an issue of yours. And I don't think for us that we're going to really see that. And even when you get into looking at with electric cars coming out and being more available where you can buy a Tesla, maybe not Tesla, but you can buy an electric engine from a car company. You're seeing, even at SEMA, you're seeing like these classic cars with electric conversions. You're seeing like that Icon company that's making classic vehicles and they're putting all modern stuff inside of them. Same idea as what I just said. All those people still need nice hoods. They still need a windshield frame. They still need a tailgate. They still need all those parts that are actually truly vintage. And it's just the drivetrain that's really different. So, like, again, unless they even if they completely ban it, I think what you'll see is you'll start seeing a shift in, we won't be able to sell flathead engines anymore, maybe.
Yeah.
But we'll still be able to sell all the other parts that put together a car. And, that I just don't. So that's why we never worry. I don't want you to argue that's why I'm very broad statements.
Good thing we put this towards the end. So
I don't feel any which way about it. I just highly doubt that we're going to see that.
Oh, definitely.
So that's why I don't get too worried about it. I think things will change, and as long as you're not narrow-minded, that you're not willing to move and change with the trends, I think it'll be totally fine. It's just things are going to change, just like clothing styles change, car styles are going to change, and if you're willing to bend with them, even if you don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But now with the internet, it's allowed everyone that has their own taste to connect, like Mike said, with people that are in.
And I think the internet also allows people to see things that they've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
You might have been super into imports like both of us were. And, nowadays kids might be super into imports because that's what all the kids are into. And they just happen to see something on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook about nostalgia stuff. And they never knew it really existed and kind of just like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And like everyone, they just end up going down the rabbit hole. And now they want to buy a Model A or a 32 and build their own. So it's like...
It's always... I think that the key is having the interest in something mechanical or automotive. If you have an interest, whether... It doesn't matter. You could be into making your electric car really fast. As you get older, your tastes may change and you may find you like whatever. And for me, it's really interesting looking back at a lot of guys I know that were into the German cars I was into when I was younger. And now maybe you don't see him for 20 years, and I run into the guy, and you run into him at a tractor show, and the dude's super into old tractors, and he fragmented off because that was his thing. It's like they started out with German 60s and 70s German cars, and now they're into like turn of the century farm equipment.
Engines,
and you're like, whatever that was, they fragmented off, and that ended up being their true passion.
Well, we even see that with old dudes that we meet at swap meets. A lot of these old guys that are like super, like has to be restoration perfect, original only. All those dudes were hot rodders back in the day.
A lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, and they just like something changed in their head where they're like, hot rods suck. I only like perfect original cars.
Yep.
It's like everyone changes as they get older. It's just those dudes, they stayed in the same vein of, classic cars.
Right.
They're just not into hot rodding. They like the original stuff now. So it's the same kind of thing. It's just some of these old dudes they kind of stayed. They just shifted slightly.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any problem with that. So that's why I'm always happy to see any kind of person getting into whatever. If a lot of younger, my nephew is right now really into ATV type stuff, 4-wheelers, 3-wheelers, motors, dirt bikes, that kind of stuff. Well, eventually almost all of us, when we were younger, you started out with something like that. You started out with bicycles, and then you got into dirt bikes or 4-wheelers or whatever, and then when you got your license, you got into cars, and so it's the same idea. It's if you have the interest, if a kid wants to fix and tinker with his bicycle, he has the interest that he will continue to go from there. You just let them find their own way, and they will find it. So that's
also, if you've ever seen Evan's 3-wheeler in the back of our videos, watch The Week in the Life of coming out on Tuesday. He got it started the other day, and it sounds wicked.
Yeah, and he's built all the pieces of it here. He, machined his front axle from scratch. He made a brake caliper adapter. He did all this machine work basically himself. I just kind of he already knew how to use a lathe and a mill from my brother. Their home shop has some of that equipment. I just showed him how to use my equipment that's a little different, and he did most of himself. He made first TIG welding project. He made all those chambers,
expansion chambers, yeah.
expansion chambers from little pieces that he welded together. It's just like
he learned the formula how to make a correct expansion chamber.
You got to program.
Well, he learned how to do all that,
all
the math and everything.
So that's really cool, and that's why as I get older, I'm more like I'm just stoked to see somebody younger that's just has an interest in whatever it is. I don't really care what it is, even if it's not my interest. I'm still stoked to see that, and you just hope that, I don't even care that much, but you hope for what we're doing.
Yeah. You
just hope that those people might eventually come around to us, but I'm not gonna, if you have a 64 Chevy and it's a young guy and it's, 4-door junker and they're psyched on it, I'm still gonna be like, oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Like, you're still gonna be, I may not show the same interest as if they rolled in with a 32 Roadster, but I'm still going to be friendly and excited that they're interested in it. And that's the takeaway. Don't be a grumpy asshole and turn your nose at somebody just because
they're into something slightly
different or whatever. Just be happy that they're into that and they're not doing something else, doing drugs.
Yeah, I was going to say
whatever the thing is. I don't know. I don't know. Plenty of cool car builders did drugs too.
Yeah.
But, that usually doesn't work out great. So stay in school, kids. Don't do drugs.
This podcast took a left turn.
Yeah. Now we went down the straight and narrow. So that's pretty much it. That's what we got for this one. Thanks you guys. And if you have any 2.5 cents to throw in, you can drop us a comment. And obviously, in YouTube, it's very easy to comment. I think Spotify now you can comment a little bit, but obviously on YouTube, there's usually a lot more, and there's
back and forth,
great discussion between our viewers. So,
and if you have any topics, shoot us an email at irontrapgarage.com. We'd love to. Sometimes it's a little tough to come up with topics. Matt and I have like a 2-hour meeting of us trying to think of topics. So if you have something you'd love us to ramble about for an hour or so, send us an email. We'd love to, we'll
try and add it to the list.
Yeah, exactly.
We have some good ones that people have given us that's on the list for future ones. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. Catch you later.